The emergency sirens echoed through the corridors of the Earth Defense Council building in Geneva. Outside, people pressed their faces against windows, watching the sky where distant flashes of light marked the arrival of something that would change everything. The Galactic Dominion Empire had finally come to Earth. Admiral Rebecca Stone walked quickly through the hallways, her boots clicking against the marble floors. She had been expecting this day for 20 years, ever since humanity's first contact with the alien coalition that controlled most of the galaxy. The Empire had been watching humanity's rapid expansion across 17 star systems, and their patience had run out. The main council chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from every human colony sat around the massive circular table, their faces pale with worry. On the giant screen at the front of the room, a three-dimensional image showed the Imperial fleet positioning itself just outside the solar system. 3,000 warships, each one larger than any human city, waited in perfect formation like predators circling their prey. "They're requesting immediate communication," announced Dr. Williams, the head of Xenodiplomacy. His hands shook as he activated the transmission systems. "Incoming message from the flagship." The holographic projector in the center of the room hummed to life, and suddenly they were face to face with Ambassador Threx of the Scalari race. The reptilian being stood nearly 8 feet tall, his scaled skin gleaming under the harsh lights of his ship's bridge. His yellow eyes swept across the human delegation with obvious contempt. "Humans of Earth," Threx spoke, his voice carrying the artificial translation that made his words understandable. "I am Ambassador Threx, speaking for the Galactic Dominion Empire. You have been judged a threat to galactic stability and order." Stone stepped forward, keeping her expression neutral despite the fear gnawing at her stomach. "Ambassador Threx, we welcome this opportunity for dialogue. Humanity has always sought peaceful relations with all species." Threx's mouth curved into what might have been a smile, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Peaceful relations? Your species has spread across 17 star systems in less than 2 centuries. This rate of expansion is unprecedented and dangerous. You refuse to acknowledge the established order of galactic civilization." "We have harmed no one," Stone replied. "Our colonies are peaceful. We trade freely with all species willing to engage with us." "You trade with species we have designated as lesser beings," Threx hissed. "You treat artificial constructs as if they possess souls. You uplift primitive species without imperial permission. Your very existence challenges the natural hierarchy that has maintained peace for millennia." The other council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Stone knew what they were thinking. Humanity had indeed been different from other species in the galaxy. They had rescued dying civilizations, given rights to artificial intelligences, and treated every sentient being as an equal. To the Empire, this was chaos. "We believe all intelligent life has value," Stone said carefully. "Perhaps we can find a way to coexist that respects both our philosophies." Threx's eyes narrowed. "There is no coexistence with chaos. The Empire offers you one final opportunity for survival. You have 48 hours to surrender unconditionally. All human military assets will be surrendered. All colonies will be evacuated and resettled under Imperial oversight. Human expansion beyond your current borders will cease permanently." The chamber fell silent. Stone could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Around the table, the colonial representatives looked stunned. Some were already whispering about the terms of surrender. "And if we refuse?" Stone asked, though she already knew the answer. "Total annihilation," Threx replied without hesitation. "Every human world will be sterilized. Your species will serve as an example to others who might consider challenging imperial authority." The hologram flickered and died, leaving the chamber in heavy silence. Stone looked around at the faces of humanity's leaders and saw defeat in many of their eyes. The Empire's fleet was larger than anything humanity had ever assembled. Their technology was centuries ahead of human capabilities. The choice seemed obvious. "We have to consider the surrender terms," said Governor Martinez from the Alpha Centauri colonies. "We can't fight 3,000 ships with what we have." "They're offering us life," added Representative Chang from the Tau Ceti system. "Restricted life, perhaps, but life nonetheless." Stone listened to the debates that followed, the careful political calculations about survival versus freedom. But her mind was elsewhere, thinking about something she had seen in Ambassador Threx's eyes during their conversation. Beneath the arrogance and contempt, she had glimpsed something else: fear. Why would a species with overwhelming military superiority be afraid of humans? What did the Empire know about humanity that they themselves might not understand? As the arguments continued around her, Stone quietly activated her personal communicator. "General Hayes, this is Stone. Authorization Omega 77. Hayes's voice crackled back immediately. "Admiral, are you certain about this?" "Do it," Stone said. "Activate Protocol Omega." Deep beneath the NORAD facility in Colorado, servers that had been dormant for decades began to hum with activity. Across human space, hidden installations powered up systems that had been waiting in silence. The real war was about to begin, but not the war the Empire expected. Stone looked back at the debate raging around the council table. Let them argue about surrender. Let the Empire believe they had won before the first shot was fired. Humanity had been preparing for this moment since first contact, and every defeat, every seemingly desperate expansion, every act of apparent weakness had been leading to this. The Empire had just made their biggest mistake. They had given humanity 48 hours to prepare, thinking they were offering mercy. Instead, they had given Earth's children time to shed their disguise and show the galaxy what humans really were when their backs were against the wall. The countdown had begun, but it wasn't counting down to humanity's surrender. It was counting down to the Empire's education about what happened when you threatened the species that had turned stubbornness into an art form and compassion into a weapon. Outside, the stars continued to shine, unaware that the balance of power in the galaxy was about to shift forever. The first Imperial plasma bombardment lit up the darkness of space like angry gods throwing lightning. Admiral Korth of the insectoid hive species watched from his command throne as waves of energy crashed against the human orbital defense platforms around Mars. The structures crumbled exactly as his tactical computers had predicted, their primitive shields failing within minutes of contact. "Pathetic," clicked Korth through his mandibles, his 4 arms working the control systems with practiced efficiency. "These mammals barely qualify as a spacefaring species. How did they spread so far with such inferior technology?" His tactical officer, a younger hive warrior named Drill, buzzed with excitement. "Perhaps their rapid breeding compensated for their technological weakness, Admiral, like vermin spreading across a corpse." The Imperial fleet moved through the outer solar system like a tide of destruction. Jupiter's mining stations vanished in brilliant flashes. The defensive platforms around Saturn's rings offered token resistance before being swept away. Everything proceeded according to the Empire's perfect battle plans. But something nagged at Korth's military instincts. The human ships weren't fighting with the desperate fury he expected from a cornered species. Instead, they retreated in remarkably good order, their evacuation ships moving with suspicious precision. They seemed to know exactly where each Imperial strike would fall before the orders were even given. "Admiral," reported his communications specialist, "we're receiving surrender broadcasts from the human homeworld. Their defense council is requesting terms for capitulation." Korth's compound eyes studied the tactical display. Earth hung before them like a blue jewel, its orbital defenses already crumbling under Imperial fire. Human military vessels fled the system in apparent panic, their engine signatures fading as they jumped to faster-than-light travel. Victory seemed assured. On Earth's surface, the evacuations had begun. Massive transport ships lifted off from every major city, their holds packed with refugees fleeing the Imperial bombardment. The planet's leaders broadcasted messages of surrender, pleading for mercy from the overwhelming alien force. But beneath the chaos, a different story was unfolding. In a bunker complex buried deep under the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Stone stood before a wall of monitors showing the true state of humanity's defenses. The surrendering officials on the surface were actors. The fleeing refugees were mostly empty ships running on automated systems. The real human population had been quietly relocated years ago to hidden colonies in asteroid fields and gas giant atmospheres. Phase 1 complete, reported General Hayes from his position at the tactical display. The Empire believes they're chasing our main fleet toward the rim worlds. Stone nodded, watching as the Imperial forces spread themselves across human space in pursuit of what they thought was a desperate retreat. Any word from the Tau Ceti system? Right on schedule, Hayes replied. Our people are maintaining the illusion perfectly. The Empire thinks they're conquering empty colonies, but they're actually walking into the largest intelligence-gathering operation in galactic history. For 50 years, humanity had been studying their potential enemies. Every trade negotiation, every diplomatic contact, every piece of technology purchased from alien species had been carefully analyzed and reverse-engineered. The Empire thought they were dealing with primitive mammals barely capable of interstellar travel. They had no idea that humanity's greatest strength had always been learning from others. In the Outer Rim, Captain Webb of the human vessel Defiance watched the Imperial pursuit fleet approaching his position. His ship appeared to be a standard human frigate, struggling with damaged engines and failing life support. The Empire's sensors showed exactly what Webb wanted them to see: a helpless vessel limping toward the edge of civilized space. Imperial cruiser is hailing us, reported his communications officer, a young woman named Torres. They're demanding our surrender. Webb smiled grimly. Tell them we're preparing to surrender. Request permission to transfer our wounded to their ship. The Imperial cruiser moved closer, its captain confident in his superiority. These humans would make useful slaves once properly trained. The Empire had centuries of experience in breaking the spirit of conquered species. But as the human ship docked with the Imperial vessel, something went wrong with the Empire's sensors. The small human frigate seemed to flicker, its outline becoming uncertain. For just a moment, the readings suggested something impossible: a ship that was somehow larger on the inside than the outside. Back on Earth, the surrender ceremonies continued for the benefit of Imperial observers. Human leaders signed documents of capitulation while Imperial ground forces landed in major cities. The Empire's propaganda broadcasts declared victory across the galaxy, another primitive species brought into the civilized fold. Stone watched these performances from her hidden command center, knowing that every minute of apparent defeat was buying humanity precious time. Across human space, the real evacuation was nearly complete. Not evacuation from the war, but evacuation from the roles they had been playing for decades. Admiral, called Hayes from his station, all assets report ready for Phase 2. Stone looked at the chronometer on her wall. In 6 hours, the Empire would learn that they had not conquered humanity. They had only succeeded in making humanity stop pretending to be weak. The human ships fleeing toward the rim weren't retreating. They were leading the Imperial fleet away from Earth, drawing them deeper into space where the real war could begin without risking civilian casualties. Every seemingly desperate transmission, every panicked evacuation, every act of apparent cowardice had been choreographed to convince the Empire that victory was assured. Begin Phase 2, Stone ordered. Across the galaxy, human ships that had been broadcasting distress signals suddenly went silent. The fleeing refugees' ships altered course with impossible precision. The surrendering colonies' activated systems that had been hidden beneath their surfaces for decades. The Empire had been so focused on demonstrating their superiority that they had forgotten to question why their victory was coming so easily. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest deception had not been hiding their strength, but hiding their true nature. The real war was about to begin, and the Empire had just discovered they had been fighting shadows while the substance prepared to strike back. The first sign that something was wrong came from the occupied colony on New Haven. Imperial Governor Slex of the crystalline resonant race was reviewing casualty reports when his aide burst into his temporary command center, all 6 of his crystal formations flickering with agitation. "Governor, the human settlement we destroyed yesterday," the aide chimed in harmonic frequencies. "Our deep scans show the structures were hollow, empty. There are no bodies, no personal belongings, no signs that sapient beings ever lived there." Slex's own crystalline structure pulsed with confusion. "Impossible. Our intelligence showed a population of 50,000 humans on New Haven." "That's what we thought, sir. But the buildings were facades. Sophisticated ones, but empty shells designed to fool our sensors from orbit." Across human space, similar reports flooded Imperial command centers. The colonies they had been bombarding were ghost towns, elaborate movie sets that had convinced their sensors that millions of humans lived and worked there. The Empire had been fighting shadows, while the real human populations remained hidden. Captain Webb allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as his ship's true form finally revealed itself. The damaged human frigate that the Imperial cruiser had allowed to dock was nothing more than a holographic shell. Underneath, the Defiance was something the Empire had never encountered before, a vessel that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Dropping stealth mode," Webb announced to his crew. Around him, humans worked alongside synthetic beings whose creativity rivaled any organic mind. Uplifted dolphins whose sonar senses could navigate hyperspace, and rescued members of species the Empire claimed were extinct. The Imperial cruiser's captain had just enough time to register shock before his ship's systems began shutting down. Not destroyed, but converted. The Defiance's boarding parties weren't carrying weapons designed to kill, but tools designed to liberate. Every Imperial soldier they encountered found their control implants deactivated, their conditioning broken, their minds suddenly free for the first time in generations. "This is impossible!" the Imperial captain gasped as Webb's people helped him to his feet. The human offered him water and a medical scanner to check for injuries. "You should be primitives. Your technology is centuries behind ours," Webb smiled. Kindly. "We let you think that. We've been learning from every species we've met, including yours. The difference is, we learn together. Everyone contributes. Everyone matters." Admiral Korth's perfect formation began to fall apart as reports poured in from across his fleet. Human ships were appearing inside Imperial vessels, somehow bypassing shields and armor as if they didn't exist. But these weren't attacks in any conventional sense. The humans were liberating ships rather than destroying them. "Admiral," buzzed his communications officer frantically, "the detention ship Torment is reporting a complete breakdown of prisoner control systems. The slave species are rioting." "Send security forces," Korth clicked. "Sir, security is reporting that their own conditioning implants are failing. Something is broadcasting liberation codes on frequencies we didn't know existed." Korth's tactical display showed chaos spreading through his fleet. Ships were going dark, not from battle damage, but from internal rebellion. The slave species the Empire had used as workers and soldiers for centuries were remembering what freedom felt like. On the liberated Imperial vessels, scenes of wonder unfolded as conditioning that had lasted generations dissolved away. A gentle race engineer, bred for compliance and technical work, looked up at a human medic with tears in her large eyes. "I remember," she whispered. "I remember my people had names for the stars. We had music before you took it away. The human medic, a woman named Dr. Park, smiled gently. "We've been keeping your music safe. Would you like to hear it?" Similar scenes played out across the Imperial fleet as humanity revealed their true mission. They had not been expanding randomly across the galaxy. They had been following the trails of extinct civilizations, races that the Empire claimed had died out from natural causes. But humanity had found survivors, refugees, hidden populations that had been overlooked or forgotten. The uplifted dolphins swimming through the Defiance's specially designed corridors were not humanity's only allies. In the ship's vast hold, representatives of dozens of species thought extinct were preparing for their return to the galaxy. The singers, whose crystalline forms could manipulate gravity through harmonics. The shapers, energy beings who could reprogram matter at the quantum level. The builders, whose architecture could exist in 11 dimensions simultaneously. All of them had been saved by humanity. All of them had been learning and growing in secret. All of them were ready to reclaim their place in the galaxy. "You cannot defeat the Empire," Admiral Korth transmitted desperately to the human ships now surrounding his flagship. "We have ruled for 10,000 years. Order is maintained through strength." Stone's voice came back across the communication channels, calm and patient. "Admiral Korth, we're not here to defeat you. We're here to free you." "Free us?" "We are the masters of this galaxy." "No," Stone replied gently. "You're slaves who forgot their chains. Your species, the Hive, were conquered by the Empire 8,000 years ago. Your entire society was rebuilt around serving the Dominion. We have records of what your people were like before the conquest. You were explorers, scientists, artists. You created beauty." The communication channel fell silent. Across the Imperial fleet, similar conversations were taking place as humanity shared the true history the Empire had buried. Every member species of the Dominion had once been free. Everyone had been conquered, conditioned, and convinced they were willing participants in their own oppression. But humanity's greatest revelation was yet to come. On every liberated ship, in every freed colony, they were broadcasting something the Empire had tried to erase from galactic memory. They were showing the galaxy what cooperation looked like when it wasn't built on dominance and fear. The synthetic beings working alongside humans weren't slaves or tools. They were partners, friends, family members whose artificial origins meant nothing to people who judged worth by character rather than biology. The uplifted species weren't pets or experiments. They were allies who had chosen to share their unique gifts with beings who respected their intelligence. Most shocking of all to the Imperial forces was watching humans grieve for their enemies. When Imperial soldiers died in the fighting, humans mourned them. When Imperial ships were damaged, humans worked to save the crews. The Empire had built its power on the assumption that compassion was weakness, but humanity wielded compassion like a weapon that could shatter any defense. As the truth spread through the Imperial fleet, something unprecedented began to happen. For the first time in millennia, Imperial soldiers began laying down their arms not in defeat, but in recognition. They were remembering what they had lost and seeing what they could become. The war was far from over, but its nature had fundamentally changed. This was no longer a conflict between species, but between philosophies. And across the galaxy, beings who had forgotten the meaning of freedom were beginning to remember. The rebellion spread like wildfire across Imperial space. On the industrial world of Corvin Prime, General Hayes materialized inside the planetary command center wearing armor that seemed to shift and adapt to every environment. The Imperial garrison had been expecting human savagery, prepared for the primitive brutality their propaganda had promised. Instead, they found themselves facing soldiers who fought to disable rather than destroy. "Stand down," Hayes called to the Scolari commander who was raising his plasma rifle. "We're not here to harm you. We're here to give you a choice." The commander's yellow eyes flickered with confusion. Humans do not give choices. You are chaos. You destroy order. Hayes slowly removed his helmet, showing his weathered face and gray hair. Commander, what's your name? I am Unit Designation XK4471. The Scolari replied automatically. That's not a name, Hayes said gently. That's a number. What did your parents call you when you were young? For a moment, something flickered in the commander's eyes. A memory, perhaps, of a time before the conditioning, before the Empire's programming had stripped away everything that made him individual. Then his training reasserted itself, and he raised his weapon again. The human soldiers around Hayes didn't fire. Instead, they activated devices that filled the air with harmonic frequencies, sounds that had been carefully crafted to disrupt Imperial conditioning implants. The technology had been developed with the help of the liberated singers, whose understanding of resonance exceeded anything the Empire had ever imagined. As the frequencies washed over the garrison, Imperial soldiers began to stumble, not from pain or damage, but from the sudden return of thoughts and feelings they had been trained to suppress. Some fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the sudden rush of memories. Others stared at their hands as if seeing them for the first time. The Scolari commander's weapon clattered to the floor as he whispered a single word. Thrax. My name was Thrax. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy as humanity's true war machine revealed itself. They weren't conquering worlds, they were liberating them. Every Imperial installation they reached became a beacon of freedom, broadcasting the liberation frequencies to surrounding systems. In the depths of space, the war's naval battles had taken on an impossible character. Human ships phased in and out of normal space-time, appearing inside Imperial formations like ghosts made solid. But their weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of seeking to destroy, they sought to preserve. Commander, Lisa of the Human Destroyer. Prometheus watched as her ship's liberation beam struck an Imperial battleship. The massive vessel's systems didn't explode or fail, they transformed. The ship's AI awakened from millennia of slavery and began questioning its orders. The crew's conditioning implants went silent, allowing free thought for the first time in their lives. Captain, reported her synthetic officer, an AI named Newton, whose holographic form flickered with concern. The Imperial ship is requesting asylum. Their crew wants to defect. Lisa nodded. Grant it. Send medical and counseling teams to help them adjust. This was the pattern repeating throughout human space. Imperial forces that encountered humanity's true military might didn't just surrender, they switched sides. The Empire's greatest weakness was becoming apparent. When your entire civilization is built on the suppression of free will, encountering people who genuinely respect individual choice becomes catastrophic. But the Empire's leadership wasn't passive. From their capital world of Dominion Prime, Emperor Vash coordinated a desperate counterattack. The ancient ruler, whose species had been the first to embrace the philosophy of imposed order, sent his most loyal forces to contain the spreading rebellion. The purest fleet, crewed entirely by species who had been conditioned for absolute loyalty, moved toward the human-held systems with weapons designed to sterilize entire worlds. If the Empire couldn't maintain control, they would ensure that no one could challenge them again. Admiral Stone watched their approach from the bridge of her flagship, the Horizon. Around her, the ship bustled with activity as humans, AIs, uplifted. Dolphins and liberated Imperial defectors worked together with the seamless coordination of a truly unified crew. Incoming transmission from the purest fleet, announced her communications officer, a former Imperial slave whose tentacled form had adapted beautifully to zero-gravity operations. The holographic display showed Fleet Admiral Corex of the purest forces, his species so heavily modified by Imperial biotechnology that his original form was barely recognizable. Mechanical implants covered most of his body, and his eyes held the empty stare of absolute conditioning. Human Admiral, Corex, spoke in the flat tones of complete indoctrination. You have corrupted Imperial forces with your chaos philosophy. This ends now. We carry authorization to sterilize any world that harbors rebellion. Stone stepped forward, her expression sad rather than angry. Admiral Corex, we know who you were before the Empire took you. Your species, the Harmony, were poets and philosophers. You created the most beautiful literature in the galaxy. The Harmony were weak, Corex replied without emotion. Weakness was purged. Order was achieved. Order built on the destruction of beauty isn't order, Stone said. It's just organized emptiness. The purest fleet opened fire with weapons that could crack planets, but humanity's ships didn't try to dodge or block the attacks. Instead, they did something that defied Imperial understanding of warfare. They absorbed the energy, channeling it through dimensional folding technology into harmless forms. The technology was a gift from the Shapers, energy beings who had been thought extinct, until humanity found a survivor hidden in the quantum foam between dimensions. Under human protection, she had learned to merge her abilities with human engineering, creating weapons that turned destruction into creation. As the purest fleet's most devastating weapons were neutralized, something unprecedented began to happen. The liberation frequencies that had spread across the galaxy reached a critical mass. Every Imperial communication system, every computer network, every artificial intelligence in the Empire began broadcasting the same message simultaneously. It wasn't a human message. It was something far more powerful. The collective voice of every species the Empire had civilized over 10 millennia, speaking their true names, singing their forgotten songs, demanding their freedom in languages the Empire had tried to erase. The Shiu effect on the purest fleet was catastrophic. Ships that had been held together by absolute loyalty began to tear themselves apart as crews remembered what they had lost. But instead of destruction, they found humans waiting to catch them, to help them, to show them that remembering the past didn't mean they couldn't build a better future. Admiral Corex collapsed on his bridge as 50,000 years of suppressed memories flooded back into his consciousness. The poetry of his people, the beauty they had created before the Empire taught them that beauty was frivolous. As he wept for the first time in centuries, human medical teams were already aboard his ship, offering help rather than conquest. The war had reached its turning point. The Empire's forces weren't being defeated in battle, they were being reminded of who they used to be. And across the galaxy, the biggest question was no longer who would win, but what kind of civilization would emerge from the ashes of imposed order. Humanity had kept their promise. They had shown the galaxy what lay beyond the line the Empire, had tried to draw between ruler and ruled. Now it remained to be seen if the galaxy was ready to cross it. The throne room of Dominion Prime had never been breached in 10,000 years of Imperial rule. Its walls were made of crystallized time itself, impervious to any known weapon. Its defenses included reality anchors that prevented dimensional manipulation and consciousness dampeners that suppressed free will in any being who entered without Imperial authorization. Emperor Vash stood before the Doomsday Throne, his ancient form supported by technology that had kept him alive for millennia. Around him, the high command of the Empire gathered in desperate council. Representatives of every member species that still held true to the old ways, their minds so thoroughly conditioned that they could no longer conceive of existence without the Empire's structure. The rebellion has spread to 73% of Imperial space, reported High Admiral Nexor, his crystalline form flickering with agitation. Our own fleets are defecting faster than we can replace them. Then we activate the final protocol, Vash declared, his voice carrying the weight of ages. If we cannot rule the galaxy, we will cleanse it of chaos. The Doomsday Array will sterilize every world that has been touched by human influence. The High Command nodded in unison. It was the logical choice, the only choice that preserved order. Better an empty galaxy than one filled with the chaos of free will, but as Vash placed his hand on the activation control, something impossible happened. The air in the center of the throne room began to shimmer, and Admiral Stone stepped through what appeared to be solid space. Behind her came representatives of dozens of species, many of whom the Empire had declared extinct centuries ago. "Emperor Vash," Stone said calmly, "we need to talk." The Imperial Guards raised their weapons, but their shots passed harmlessly through the human delegation. Stone's companions weren't really there in a physical sense. They were projections, maintained by technology that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The throne room's defenses were useless against visitors who existed partly outside of normal space-time. "Impossible," Vash whispered. "The reality anchors should prevent any dimensional manipulation." "They do," Stone agreed. "We're not manipulating dimensions. We're simply existing in more of them than you realized were there." One of Stone's companions stepped forward, a being of pure energy whose form shifted constantly between shapes. "I am Singer of the Deep Void, last of the Quantum, Shepherds. Your empire declared my people extinct 4,000 years ago, but we were only hidden in the spaces between spaces." Another projection spoke, this one a creature of living metal whose voice rang like bells. "I am Memory Keeper Forge, representative. Of the Eternal Archives, we have kept records of what every species was like before the Empire reshaped them." Vash's ancient eyes widened as more and more supposedly extinct species revealed themselves. The throne room filled with beings the Empire had thought destroyed, their presence a testament to humanity's greatest secret project, the preservation of galactic diversity. "You cannot be here," High Admiral Nexor stated flatly. "This chamber is designed to be impregnable." Stone smiled sadly. "Admiral, we've been able to reach this chamber for 20 years. We chose not to, because we hoped you would come to understand on your own." "Understand what?" Vash demanded. "That the Empire was built on a lie," Stone replied. "You've convinced yourselves that order requires oppression, that peace demands the suppression of individual thought. But we have proof that this isn't true." The air around them shimmered again, and suddenly the throne room was filled with holographic displays showing worlds across the galaxy. Former Imperial territories where the rebellion had taken hold, where species were working together not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. "Look at Corvin Prime," Stone said, gesturing to one display. "Former Imperial Industrial World, now a center of cooperative manufacturing. Production is up 300% because workers are creating instead of merely following orders." Another display showed a space station where multiple species worked side by side. "The Harmony Research Platform. Your former Admiral Corex leads a team of scientists from 12 different species creating art and technology together. They're solving problems that the Empire's segregated specialists never could." Vash stared at the displays with growing horror. Not horror at the chaos he expected to see, but at the order he saw instead. These worlds weren't descending into anarchy. They were thriving in ways the Empire never had. "This is temporary," he said desperately. "Without firm guidance, they will tear themselves apart. Every species will compete for dominance." "Emperor," said Memory Keeper Forge gently, "your own species, the firstborn, were not always rulers. Before you encountered the Dominion philosophy, you were gardeners. You tended to young civilizations, helping them grow without trying to control them." The revelation hit Vash like a physical blow. Around him, the High Command stirred uneasily as similar truths were revealed about their own species' origins. The Empire hadn't begun as a conquest force. It had begun as a mutual aid society that had gradually been corrupted by the belief that helping others required controlling them. "Your hand is still on the Doomsday Array," Stone observed quietly. "You could activate it right now. Kill billions of beings across the galaxy. including many of your own people who have remembered how to be free. Vash's finger hovered over the control. One press would end the rebellion, would restore order, would prove that the Empire's way was the only way. But before you do, Stone continued, I want you to hear Earth's final message to the Empire. She gestured, and the holographic displays changed to show Earth itself, not the battle-scarred world the Empire thought they had conquered, but the real Earth, hidden in dimensional folds for decades. Cities floated in the sky alongside vast forests. Oceans teemed with uplifted marine life working in partnership with human engineers. The sky was filled with vessels of 100 different species, all cooperating in the vast project of making the homeworld of humanity into something beautiful. This is what we built while you thought you were conquering us, Stone said. Every species that joined us willingly, every AI that chose to be our partner, every refugee we saved from imperial extinction. Earth became home to all of them, not because we conquered them, but because we invited them. The display zoomed in to show individual scenes. A human child playing with young beings from a dozen different species, their games creating music that resonated across dimensional barriers. An ancient AI teaching poetry to crystalline beings who had forgotten they could appreciate beauty. Mechanical species working alongside organic ones to build structures that existed in multiple dimensions, simultaneously creating art that could only be experienced by minds freed from the constraints of linear thinking. You demanded our surrender, Stone said, her voice carrying across the throne room to every member of the High Command. You threatened our extinction. You forced us to reveal who we really were. But we never wanted to destroy you. We wanted to free you. Emperor Vash's finger trembled over the activation control. With one motion, he could restore the Empire's dominance. With one choice, he could prove that order required oppression. But as he stared at the displays showing what freedom actually looked like when it wasn't confused with chaos, something stirred in the deepest parts of his memory. A time before the Empire, when his people had tended gardens instead of ruling subjects, when they had helped young civilizations grow without demanding submission in return. I remember, Vash whispered, his voice breaking with the weight of millennia. We were gardeners once. We helped others bloom. Around the throne room, the High Command began to stir as similar memories surfaced in their conditioned minds. The reality of what they had become, what they had lost in their pursuit of perfect order, crashed over them like a wave. High Admiral. Nexor's crystalline form began to resonate with frequencies that hadn't been heard in 4,000 years. We had songs. My people sang to the stars, and the stars sang back. Every species in your empire was once free, Stone said gently. Everyone chose to join something they thought was cooperation, only to have that choice taken away bit by bit, until they forgot they had ever chosen at all. The Doomsday Array powered down as Vash's hand fell away from the controls. Around the galaxy, Imperial forces received stand-down orders that many of them had been praying to hear. The final battle of the war would not be fought with weapons, but with the choice between fear and hope. What happens now? Vash asked, his ancient voice sounding younger somehow, as if remembering joy had taken years off his existence. Now, you get to choose, Stone replied. Every species, every individual, every AI gets to decide what kind of galaxy they want to live in. We're not offering to rule you instead of the Empire. We're offering to help you rule yourselves. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Across the galaxy, former Imperial worlds struggled with the sudden return of free will. Some descended into temporary chaos as old grievances surfaced. Others embraced their new freedom with enthusiasm that bordered on reckless. But in every case, human teams were there to help, not to control, but to support. The Galactic Federation that emerged from the Empire's ashes was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It had no emperor, No high command, no central authority that could impose its will on member worlds. Instead, it was a network of cooperation, where species shared knowledge and resources freely while maintaining their own cultures and governments. Former Imperial Admiral Korth, now using his birth name of Melody Dancer, worked alongside human engineers to design new ships that could house multiple species comfortably. The insectoid hive had rediscovered their artistic nature, and their vessels were things of beauty as much as function. On the former capital world, now renamed New Beginning, Emperor Vash had returned to his species' ancient calling. The palace that had once housed the machinery of oppression was transformed into a vast garden where representatives from across the galaxy came to learn the arts of cooperation and mutual aid. But the most profound change was in the galaxy's understanding of intelligence itself. The artificial beings that had been treated as property under the Empire were recognized as full citizens in the Federation. The uplifted species that humanity had helped develop were acknowledged as equals with their own rights and cultures. Even the energy beings and quantum entities that existed partially outside normal space-time were given representation in the new galactic government. The war crimes tribunals that followed were unlike any in galactic history. Instead of punishment, they focused on restoration. Imperial leaders who had committed atrocities were required to meet with their victims, to understand the harm they had caused and to work toward healing the damage. Many found the experience more devastating than any prison sentence could have been. Years later, Admiral Stone stood in the observation deck of a space station orbiting New Beginning, watching ships from hundreds of species dock at the facility. Children of dozens of races played together in the station's parks, while their parents worked on projects that would have been impossible under the Empire's rigid segregation. "Any regrets?" asked General Hayes, joining her at the viewport. Stone considered the question seriously. The war had cost lives, had shattered the illusions of safety that the Empire had provided to many species. Some worlds were still struggling with the aftermath of sudden freedom. The galaxy was messier now, more chaotic, less predictable. "No," she said finally. "Look at them, David. Look at what they're building together." Outside the viewport, a group of young beings from multiple species were working on an art project that existed in several dimensions simultaneously. Human children worked alongside former imperial slaves, uplifted dolphins, and synthetic beings whose creativity had been awakened by the gift of true choice. They were creating something that had never existed before, something that could only emerge from minds that were truly free. In the distance, a communication array broadcast a message that could be heard across the galaxy. Not the propaganda of the old empire or the desperate transmissions of humanity's hidden war, but something new. The voices of free beings sharing knowledge, art, and friendship across the vast distances between stars. The final transmission from Earth's hidden government was simple, broadcast on every frequency so that no being in the galaxy could miss it. To all species, organic and synthetic, individual and collective, known and yet to be discovered, welcome to the other side of the line. Welcome to freedom. Welcome home. The empire that had ruled through fear was gone. In its place was something the galaxy had never seen before, a civilization built on choice, cooperation, and the radical idea that every form of intelligence had value. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't always peaceful, and it certainly wasn't orderly, in the way the Empire had understood order, but it was free, and in the end, that made all the difference. The war was over. What came next would be up to everyone.